Hey all, Taffy here. So, Superman's weakness. It's the Nintendo 64. There's no discussion, no debate, it's the Nintendo 64. Superman is one of the most iconic superheroes and characters ever created. Since his first appearance in Action Comics 1, Superman has been adapted across all forms of media. He's in cartoons, TV shows, lunchboxes, and various movies. And depending on how good my timing is, James Gunn's Superman movie should be out by now, and I pray it turns out good and doesn't fool me like Black Adam did back in 2022.
The Black Adam experience on Roblox.
Hey guys, I just saw Superman and it was better than The Flash, so I'm gonna rank it a 3.5 out of 10. Wait, no, 3.5 out of 5. Patrick, what do you have to say?
3.2 out of 10. You did not,
3.2 out of 10? 5. Out of 10?
3.9 out of 5.
I might watch it again, my answer might change. Alright, back to the actual video now.
Due to Superman exceeding the popularity of many real-world figures, I assume you'd know about his powers. He can fly, he has super strength, laser vision, freeze breath, X-ray vision, and can rebuild the Great Wall of China with nothing more than a stare. And while he has quite the selection of superpowers, he has one weakness that everybody and their grandmother knows: Kryptonite. That rock that if you can get your hands on it, Superman is screwed. Although Kryptonite is Superman's physical weakness that can either weaken his strength and abilities, or if pink, turn him gay, fall in love with his enemies, then inevitably get his heart broken. That's not what this video is about. I'm aware that Kryptonite can be used well in a Superman story, but it doesn't really excite me, and I don't think it ever really did. Everybody knows that Batman beats Superman with prep time and a bit of Kryptonite. And whilst it's a serviceable plot device, the true weakness that has always interested me in Superman is his psychological weaknesses. To many people who aren't very familiar with Superman's stories and just know the character by name and appearance, there's this assumption that he lives a life of near perfection, and that he's a near flawless character, the Boy Scout hero, which is a reason why I feel Batman has become the more popular hero between them recently. Because people are more aware of the nuances of his stories through his more popular selection of films and iconic cartoons like Batman the Animated Series. And although Superman has had some really good on-screen representations, they aren't as popular, and I won't lie to you, I've only watched the Christopher Reeve Superman movies anyways, so in this video I want to cover one of Superman's best stories, beloved by readers and fans of the character, Superman for All Seasons. It's one of the best Superman stories for new readers to try because it gives you the full Superman experience, but without Kryptonite. You meet his family, see his origins, his highs, his lows, and the comic helped me to understand why Superman deserves to be in the position he is, not just as a staple DC character, but arguably the definitive superhero. So, once again, my name's Taffy, and this is
Superman, Clark Kent, they the same but one dark glasses. You're gonna mess with Metropolis. Lex Luthor's gonna throw another fit.
Superman for All Seasons was first published in 1998 and is one of the many collaborations between Jeff Loeb and the late Tim Sale. Loeb is a 5-time Eisner Award winner and Sale is a 4-time Eisner Award winner, hence why it's no surprise that the two could click so well together. The duo are one of my favorite writer-artist pairings in comics because the tonality of their work oddly fit in a pretty perfect way, as Loeb's text boxes synchronize with Sale's splash pages and large-scale set pieces in a way that not many other comic books have made me feel. The two first collaborated in 1991 when working on The Challengers of the Unknown Volume 2, issues 1 through 8, and since then have made books that are beloved by so many readers, most notably Batman The Long Halloween, the Marvel color books such as Spider-Man Blue and Daredevil Yellow, and the topic of this video, Superman for All Seasons. Loeb has had a very successful career in comics, and has since moved on to working on the production of television shows, and wrote for Smallville, Lost, and became a lead figure at Marvel Television. However, he's lost a good amount of respect after several racial controversies he's been in, mainly during his time working on the Netflix Marvel shows such as Iron Fist and Daredevil. While Sale has dabbled in television as he created artwork for the series Heroes, he mainly stuck with comics and has been praised throughout the industry by fans and big names such as legendary artist Jim Lee and even Christian Bale. His style was very eye-grabbing as he took a slightly more unique and cartoony approach to his pencils and inks, whilst also showing a very detailed set of skills in his draftsmanship, as his establishing panels and splash pages were bursting with life and heart. And whilst I adore the duo's work on Spider-Man Blue and Batman The Long Halloween, nothing has captivated me more than their work together on Superman for All Seasons. Loeb explained that one of the great things that he wanted to capture was the grandeur that is Superman, and that was to have double-page spreads with big sky shots. And I believe that they were able to capture that near perfectly. And the colors by Bjarne Hansen, I'm so sorry I butchered that, are the cherry on top. Rather than using simple, clean-cut, cel-shaded colors or smooth gradients created with a digital coloring app, he varies with his paints to create textured, intricate tones. These colors that bleed mood and expression, and depending on the scene, he can switch from heavy tones to very flat colors. All controversies aside, this is a masterclass of a team right here, and they produced one of my favorite works of art ever. The story follows some of the early days of Superman, from when he first starts to notice that he isn't like everybody else. We get to see a slice of his home life in Smallville, and the transition he has to make when he moves to Metropolis to pursue journalism and becoming a superhero. We get a few different perspectives, such as that from Clark Kent, Lois Lane, and Lex Luthor, and a lot of these stories are relayed through narration. I've never really been the biggest fan of narration, but in this story, it felt quite necessary. It gets the point across that we're following the story of the symbol of hope for the DC universe, and whilst narration does separate the reader from the story to an extent, I still feel personally involved in the drama and feelings that the characters have to endure. We get to be inside the characters' heads and see their thoughts, their fears, their hatred, but it never feels forced or cheesy. It comes across as rather genuine. Whilst I could cover the entire 4-issue run, I wanted to focus on my favorite issue of the series, the one that stuck with me for the past few months after reading this book for the first time, issue 3. This issue in particular ties into the main point of this video, Superman's weakness, which, although he technically has quite a few that we're already aware of, such as Kryptonite or red sun radiation, humans have physical weaknesses too, and in this story, the weakness that Superman has to tackle is his empathy and care for others. In issue 2, a huge fire takes place at Chemco Labs. As Superman arrives to help, he finds drones commissioned by Lex Luthor attending the fire and trying to save the civilians. However, they lack the humanity and care that a proper first responder would have when dealing with a crisis like this, even causing them to nearly leave one of the chemists, Jenny Vaughn, in the building to die. After dealing with the fire and rescuing the victims who were trapped, not only does Superman get all the praise, but Lex is once again left in ridicule, which leads him to devise a plan to break Superman, using Jenny Vaughn as the centerpiece for his scheme. We start issue 3 with a monologue from Lex Luthor himself. After spending a night in jail and getting swarmed by the press as soon as he got released, Lex goes on and on about the one thing he claims to care about, Metropolis. He refers to her as his city, and it's clear that as the weeks and seasons go by and Superman continues to prevail over any situation and make Lex look more like a numpty in front of the Huz, he loses more and more control of the city to him. Whether Superman is doing this on purpose to expose Lex for his hidden agendas or not, he hates that despite all he has accomplished, building his empire and skyrocketing the city into stardom with him, one man who can leap tall buildings, stop trains with his bare hands, can be practically anywhere at once, and even respawn the Great Wall of China without pressing Ctrl Z, can just snatch everything away from him without putting in any of the time, sweat, blood, or tears. And after a pretty one-sided conversation with Superman as he loomed powerfully over Lex, both literally and figuratively looking down on him, regardless of the fact that Lex was standing on one of the tallest buildings in the city, it fuels him even further to put an end to their rivalry and be done with Superman. As we then follow Lex to a large room filled with screens playing video clips of Superman and his feats, as Jenny Vaughn is tied to a chair, forced to watch her savior constantly on repeat. The next day, Clark catches Lois peeking at his notes, but before their conversation can get too far, she collapses straight in his arms. As he looks around the Daily Planet bullpen to find everybody else in the same unconscious state, he rushes through the city to find that everybody's down, completely knocked out, whilst Lex continues to speak, comparing Superman to a Dalmatian in an empty fire station, smelling smoke, pulling his leash as hard as possible, not being able to help anybody. Superman finds Lex completely unharmed. I mean, of course he is. And they have a back and forth on who's to blame for the viral infection that's plagued the city. Although it's dead obvious that Lex is behind this, and Superman is sure that he could catch Lex out by just pulling him outside and waiting for one of Lex's cronies to bring him the antidote. But instead, he affirms that he's not going to do that because he's nothing like Lex. Hence why he swallows his disdain for him and asks Lex for help. Trying not to revel too much in the fact that Superman just asked him for help, Lex reintroduces Superman to Jenny Vaughn, who now goes by Toxin. As a biochemist, she knows how to help the city and has concocted an antidote to save everybody. However, Superman needs to take her with him to release it, as Lex claims that if it's released improperly, things could get even worse. So reluctantly, Superman carries Toxin through the air as they save the city from this nightmare, whilst Lex recounts his childhood as his father would beat him and try to make him cry, but to not let his father gain that satisfaction, Lex would stare him down as he did, in turn making his abuse hurt his father more than it ever could hurt Lex, which says a lot about his personality. The harder someone or something tries to drag Lex down or destroy him, the harder he will fight back and try to make them suffer. It starts to rain and bolts of red and blue lightning dance across the sky as the city starts to wake up slowly and breathe life again. As they descend back to Luthor's building, Superman congratulates encapsulates toxin for her work. But before she can relay how much that means to her, she begins to cough, and as they land, her heart just stops beating and she dies in Clark's arms. As he cradles the body of someone who was once one of his biggest admirers, Lex just digs into his soul, saying that for the most powerful person in the world, he not only doesn't understand the fragility of the human condition, but he might as well be alone in the world due to the stature he holds. And as Lex says all this, he finally gets to stand over him and ends his condescending monologue telling Superman to go back wherever he came from before he fails us all. And without hearing a word from Clark, the next page brings us back to Smallville as the defeated and broken Clark Kent goes back to his parents. Awesome, but I have something that really interests me about this issue. In Lex's grand plan to get rid of Superman, instead of trying to murder him with a biological weapon, he puts the entire city's health and lives at risk, then sacrifices an innocent woman. And it makes it even more petty, spiteful, and vile when you realize that he ended up sacrificing a woman who practically idolized Superman and had a whole Man of Steel shrine like a Snyderverse Twitter apologist. To be fair, in previous issues, it has been established that Superman could withstand the explosion of missiles, and there could be a sliver of a chance that Lex hoped that the bioagent that he released would kill Superman too, but it's pretty obvious that his intentions weren't to do that. Lex wasn't sure how to kill him or how to physically harm him. Like, if he tried to hit Superman with the right cross, his arm would literally turn to jelly, but he knew a way that would hurt Superman because the one thing that he clearly shares with the rest of the human race is his conscience, something that Lex doesn't seem to have in this story looking back at what happened. So he was content with killing an innocent if it meant that he could make Superman feel the type of pain that he did, just due to his existence. And it worked. Of course, the issue doesn't end with Clark packing his bags and going to Malele rather than facing his issues head on. He takes some time to go home, soul search a bit, and save his family from a flood, returning to Metropolis when he realizes that everybody can lose sight of reality for a bit when things are going well. But it doesn't mean that you just then go and give up. You have to work through the hard times and know what you're worth. Hence why Lex isn't able to keep Clark gone for too long. But the fact that this event caused Superman to question his worth and whether he should be doing what he does, even if he does good majority of the time, is kind of depressing. Because Clark isn't Superman just for the thrill of it or because it's radical. He genuinely just wants to help. He would rather be like everybody else, but since he can't do that, he feels that obligation to use his gifts to uplift the world and keep people safe and happy. I love a good fight scene, and watching superheroes battle is one of the easiest ways for dopamine to be produced in my brain. However, I love this story for not focusing on the violence, but on Superman trying to save people and just brighten their days. There's no Zod, Lex isn't wearing a mecha suit, and Darkseid is probably aura farming somewhere in Apocalypse. But here we get to see the side of Superman that I think matters the most. The paragon of peace who will save the day. The guy who gives the people of Metropolis a reason to look up. A reason for hope. Before I give my closing thoughts on Superman, I want to dedicate a whole section of this video to my favorite comic book artist, Tim Sale. I first saw Tim Sale's art in one of those Illustrator Reacts videos years ago, back when people would react to good and bad comic art. Yes, I'm aware that there's been a resurgence of that type of content, but it doesn't matter right now. My first reaction to Sale's work was kinda mixed, since it was a page from The Long Halloween showcasing Batman and Catwoman. Whilst I was fond of Sale's depiction of the Dark Knight, I wasn't the biggest fan of his Catwoman, as she was super ripped and I didn't think it matched the notion of her being a sleek and stealthy cat burglar. But a year or so later, I read Spider-Man Blue for the first time, and it was love at first sight. Sale drew Spidey in a way that nobody else has, and he could capture the charm of the 60s college era as good as Ditko and Romita Sr. did. If you go on my Instagram, I think there's still a highlight from years ago when I read it. Also, this was 4 years ago, I'm not a pirate. Marvel, please don't sue me. But from the moment I finished this book, I had become extremely infatuated with Sale's art and watched as many videos of him drawing as I possibly could. And unfortunately there weren't that many because he's low-key kind of mysterious. I then went on and read The Long Halloween, which was a beautifully illustrated masterpiece, showing that although Sale mainly stands out with his more whimsical and hopeful works, he can also create dark and noir-esque imagery that matches the story that he's illustrating. At the time, he'd surpassed my previous comic book art heroes such as Ryan Ottley frankly, by a huge extent, and it had become a small dream of mine to meet him at a convention at some point and to get a commission drawn by him. But the morning I heard that he'd passed, it was like a massive punch to the gut. I don't remember whether I'd had school or not that morning, but I remember sitting at the table for breakfast and looking through Instagram, only to see that horrible post. I was really upset by this, and it low-key had me in a funk for quite a while, and made me realize how life can end so suddenly. How only weeks before I was hoping that all the COVID nonsense would just wrap up, so then I could hopefully meet him at a con sometime soon and get a commission and meet a hero of mine. Eventually I read Superman for All Seasons, and not only did it make me fall in love with Sale's artwork all over again, but it also made me love and appreciate Superman so much more than I ever did. I think that Superman for All Seasons is Sale's magnum opus because he not only created magical imagery that lives rent-free in my mind, but is the best artist-colorist pairing that Sale has been with. I love the way Sale drew Superman and Clark in this book. He renders Clark to look like a big, friendly farm boy, a gentle giant, whilst as Superman he retains that size but his posture is more upright, and you can see that masculine V-taper in his back, to the point where even when Lois Lane almost puts together that Clark is Superman, she has to come together and be like, what am I talking about? Because the way they carry themselves is genuinely so different. Lex Luthor oozes with hatred and loathing in every panel and splash page he's in. The silhouette of him and the way his business suit drapes over him feels so iconic and sinister, and I love the panels of him aura farming and living his life, whilst he can't think of anything but how much he hates Superman for stealing Metropolis from him. I don't think I've seen a Lois Lane that looks more snarky and confident in her craft, except when she crashes out at Clark for scooping the Smallville flood story, and I'm not sure whose idea it was, but Superman's moveset is a lot more limited in this comic, and he only really has super strength, flight, speed, x-ray vision, and hearing. He doesn't fire laser beams out of his eyes, he doesn't have freeze breath, and he doesn't spawn Great Walls of China. By not including those powers, it grounds Superman a little more, and makes him a little less threatening, but more of the friendly protector of Metropolis who protects and makes people happy, rather than looking for the next kaiju to fight. I'm not against Superman using his powers to fight, I'm just expressing my appreciation for this take on the character, and I think that Sale was definitely the best choice for this type of interpretation. There's a scene where Clark reveals his powers to his childhood friend Lana Lang, and he lifts her into the air and they fly over Smallville together. He doesn't cradle her like he usually does with the civilians or Lois, but he simply just holds her hand and they soar in the air together. Once again, it's a magical feeling that not many other comics have made me feel, and although it low-key doesn't make sense, whatever, shut up, I like it, okay? But yeah. Rest in peace to Tim Sale. Your art has inspired, entertained, and left many people stunned. I'm glad I got to be a fan of your work, and hopefully someday I'll be in the position to own my own Tim Sale piece. Okay, back to the Boy Scout. So as the title and this thumbnail insinuate, Superman's most interesting weakness is the sense of failure and empathy he has for others. This is my opinion, of course. I don't know what your tastes and interests are, other than the fact that you watch 30% of my videos and just run away. While stabbing Superman with a green rock is a way to take him out, it doesn't add much tension to the story for me. It's like two martial artists having a fight, one with a dagger and one with his fists. So the fist fighter pulls out a Glock 40. Not a great example, or joke, I'm sorry. I just want to say Glock 40. Glock 40. Glock 41? Glock 40's spaz! But when Lex turns Clark's love for the city into a weapon, it renders him nearly useless. He can punch real hard, he can fly to the moon, and create as many walls of China as he wants. But when 90% of the people that depend on him are all gone, he not only can't be everywhere all at once, but he has to work past his issues with Lex to get help, because Superman always takes the high road. And although he saves nearly everyone, the fact that he still let a person die is enough for Clark to leave Metropolis entirely. And in Lex's monologue, where he mentions that Clark was careless to let his guard down and allow Toxin to fly with him, as it ended up exposing her to those chemicals, it raises the question of whether Superman is endangering humans due to his existence and place on Earth in general. I also started watching My Adventures with Superman recently, fantabulous show by the way, must watch. They also similarly cover the idea of Clark struggling with his powers, not because he can't necessarily control them, but because he doesn't like what that could potentially mean for him as a person. He technically is better than the rest of us. He's near invincible, and if he takes that for granted, or if he doesn't treat that with the utmost care, respect, and responsibility, is he being a bad person? Or in the words of Lex Luthor, is he failing us all? Yeah, I'm asking you, tell me in the comments. Bruh. Whilst I've never been the biggest Superman fan, I've always been fond of the character a little bit. From the first time I watched the Christopher Reeve movies as a kid, seeing him in action in Justice League the Animated Series, then not being too pleased with his recent live action depictions, it's been a while since I've taken the time to consume Superman media, because I was starting to sadly believe those voices that said Superman is just a near-perfect Boy Scout who Batman could solo with prep time and Kryptonite. Especially since I was that one annoying kid on the playground who explained how Batman could beat everybody up with prep time. But Superman is so much more than that, and always has been. It's not one of those cases where over the years, different and new writers have revamped the character and changed him to make him better. In one of his first comic issues, he prevents a man from taking his life and helps him rebuild his career. I'll leave a link in the description to this video I saw in the comic, which I loved, since I know a lot of you guys have some cooked attention spans and can't read for nothing anymore. I know, because I'm just like you. If you take time to get to know Superman, to know Clark Kent, you'd know that there's so much more depth to his character than just being OP and getting destroyed by a green rock. I've also now gained a big intrigue on Lex Luthor, and I'm definitely going to keep reading more Superman because I can't get enough of their dynamic. Lois Lane's ambition and self-belief has always been an inspiration for me from my childhood, and she will also be my fictional crush for life. Superman's world can look picture perfect at times for sure, especially in contrast to Gotham, but it can also be humbling and dark, and at times like those, they can take place without Kryptonite being mentioned once. So in conclusion, Kryptonite has slammed out Superman before, like on multiple occasions, so maybe it is his true weakness.
But say something.
Yeah. What? You know the rules.